This video is brought to you by AudioQuest, makers of the Dragonfly range of USB DACs. Click to AudioQuest.com for more information.
I don't really know how to start this video actually, because, well, this is the AirPods Pro from Apple, the original, but then recently I bought the version 2, the second generation AirPods Pro from Apple. So today we're going to look at this one and talk about how it compares to the original, and also some Sony true wireless IEMs. It's bonkers to think, really, that we've only had active noise cancellation inside true wireless IEMs for about 3 years. The first, I believe, were the Sony WF-1000XM4. Now, I liked those, but I didn't love them. However, the following generation, the XM4, I really fell hard for those last year, and we made a video about those over in the Tiergarten over there. And in that video, we discussed how the Sony WF-1000XM4 stacked up against the original AirPods Pro. And it was obvious to me that the Sony gave us better noise cancellation, both passive and active, because they seal more of the ear off initially, which I think makes lighter work for the DSP and its active noise cancellation smarts. And the Sony were also better for music playback. They sounded fuller, richer, more dynamic, they punched harder. They weren't perfect, but at that time for me, they were the best that I'd heard to date for listening to music. And by contrast, the Sony made the original AirPods Pro sound a bit dry, a bit papery, and somewhat irritating when listening to music. And sometimes the AirPods Pro would sound a little bit sibilant and also somewhat congested in the low end, because they try and sort of cram sub-bass, mid-bass all into sort of one zone, or at least that's how it sounded to me on on more bass-heavy music. And to that end, I would never recommend the original AirPods Pro to any music fan. But I kept them around for 2 reasons. They were absolutely wonderful to wear for a long, long period of time. The comfort factor, sky high, way better than the Sony WF-1000XM4. And that also made the AirPods Pros, the originals, better for podcasts, because you only really need a fairly basic sound to, I guess, hear what's going on in a podcast. I think so anyway. And it also made them better for phone calls, and better for long phone calls, and better for long podcasts because of that sky-high comfort factor. And in the end, at the end of last year, I found myself using 2 different true wireless IEMs. I would pick up the Sony if I wanted to go out and listen to music, but not really if I wanted to make a phone call. A quick phone call would be fine, but if it was a long phone call, I would go and pick up the Apple AirPods Pro, or if I was listening to a podcast, again, I would pick up the Apples. So 3 years after the original AirPods Pro and a year after we made our video, Apple have introduced AirPods Pro number 2. They appear on the phone with a hash or a pound sign, as the Americans say. Now, I wasn't going to buy a pair because of my general sort of frustrations with the originals with music playback. But a music producer friend in Los Angeles who had bought a pair suggested I really reconsider that position. So just before I took 5 days vacation in Spain, I went up to my local Apple store and I bought a pair of the AirPods Pro Generation 2. So what's new? Well, the case is now part of the Find My software solution that comes with an iPhone, so you can find it if you lose it. There's also a speaker on the bottom that makes sounds when you drop the case onto a wireless charging pad or connect it to a lightning cable. And speaking of charging, The case now works with MagSafe chargers and with the Apple Watch charger, which I've used it with. Very useful. And we get better battery life, apparently, according to Apple, from the second generation AirPods Pro. We get 6 hours from a full charge from the case instead of the previous generation's 4 hours. The earphones themselves are nearly indistinguishable from the original. They're the same shape. So you could probably quite easily drop an old one into a new case mistakenly. Thankfully, the software in an iPhone will now tell you if you've done that. It will tell you if you put the wrong AirPod into your second gen AirPods Pro case. The tips are also the same shape, and I think the mesh has been changed a little bit by Apple, but you can still put a Gen 1 tip on a Gen 2 AirPods Pro or vice versa. So that means that if you're a fan of third-party tips, and I am, generally speaking, then those will still work on your second gen AirPods Pro too. You won't need to buy a new set. The vent placement on the new AirPods Pro has been relocated, presumably for improved sound quality. But in the stem, we now get volume control. So you can swipe up or down on that stem to change the volume. And what I really like about that is we get audible feedback. So we get a tiny donk sound when we've successfully swiped up or down. And that works on either of the AirPods. So it can work on the left one or the right one. Now on the inside of each AirPod, Apple is loudly touting the presence of its new H2 chip, which according to them gives us much better computational audio functionality. And I gotta say, the new transparency mode is freaky good. And if you've got a pair of AirPods Pro 2, I invite you to try this. Like, put transparency mode on, because I did this on an airplane last week. I put transparency mode on, and then I took one of the AirPods out of my ear to try and hear the difference. The difference is there, but it's not huge, right? So the finding there is that transparency mode is very, 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 very close to real life, which I think is astonishing. And if you do that same transparency mode experiment with the Sony WF-1000XM4, you notice a much starker difference between the earphone being in and transparency mode being on, and then just pulling it out. You can definitely hear the Sony processing, and it just sounds more echoey. And the second gen AirPods Pro gives us much better active noise cancellation, which I think is now on par with the Sony, apart from wind rejection, because Sony has a mode in its app that actively and successfully tackles wind noise that kind of just blasts over the earpieces as you're walking along, or if you're moving on a bike. I know you shouldn't necessarily do that on a street, but maybe in a park or in the country, or when you've got transparency mode on, it's fine. However, wind noise is still a problem on the AirPods Pro second gen, just as it was on the first gen. That's why I changed my tips out for a third-party solution to help mitigate some of that wind noise issue. And it did, but it caused a hit to the low frequency response of the earphone. But of course, I wasn't really listening to music through the original AirPods Pro, so I didn't really mind that. But as we'll see with the AirPods Pro version 2, yeah, I'm not keen to change to a third-party tip. Talking of tips, in order to get the most from active noise cancellation from the second gen AirPods Pro, and also the first gen really, it's really important to get a good seal. It's really important to choose the right tip. Now, Apple have done something really cool here, is that in the iPhone, this doesn't exist on Android. Really, what I'm talking about today is mostly for iPhone users. So inside the iPhone, there is a section in the settings that tests whether or not the seal inside the ear is good. Now, I think this is brilliant because many people might not know, if they're not audio nerds like us, they might not know that the seal of an earphone is fundamental to its sound quality. So it's great that Apple are now communicating that message to every AirPods user, AirPods Pro version 2 user. Olaf has just reminded me that the Sonys also do that. They also test for the quality of the ear tip seal inside the app. And these improvements to active noise cancellation, to transparency mode, plus the ongoing sky-high comfort factor still make the AirPods Pro in their second gen form my pick for podcasts and phone calls. But the biggest news with the second generation AirPods Pro is that Apple have changed up the drivers and the amplifiers that control those drivers. Now, I know a lot of noise is made about the codecs, right? So AirPods Pro, in fact, all Apple earphones and headphones, they only include support for AAC because that's all that's in an iPhone. So you're only going to get an AAC codec connection working with Apple AirPods products, which I think is totally fine. Maybe it's not quite as good as Outtakes, maybe it's not quite as good as LDAC, but the hardware inside our Bluetooth headphones, the drivers, the amplifiers, the DSP, that has a much greater impact on what we hear than the codec in play. Let's talk about sound quality by pulling on some side-by-side comparisons. So the second gen AirPods Pro compared to the first gen. I think the second gen are airier. They no longer sort of panty bunch the bass. We get clear, separate bass and then sub bass. The sibilance issue I think is pretty much gone. My only criticism really is sometimes I wish vocals were a bit further forward. They're a little bit recessed sometimes, but not always, and it's certainly not a deal breaker. Now, because the second generation AirPods Pro have a much fuller sound, a much richer sound, a much punchier sound as well. Yeah, full, rich, punchy. I kind of say that a lot, don't I? But it's kind of true when you kind of get this sort of more voluptuous, weightier heft from either a pair of speakers or in this case, a true wireless IEM. And that extra heft and weight and fullness that we get from the new AirPods Pro puts them, for me, on par with the Sony, but with superior overall clarity. The new AirPods Pro, to me, sound more transparent. I'm not going to say closer to source, but more transparent than the Sony. Now, the Sony sound, yeah, they sound chunkier and a bit bigger, but they also sound comparatively muddier than the AirPods Pro second gen. So not only do we get a better sound from the AirPods Pro version 2, with greater clarity, we also get superior phone call performance. Remember, this is one of the things I loved about the original AirPods. That's been carried over into version 2, apart from wind noise. That's still a little bit of an issue. I don't want to switch over to a third-party tip with the new one because I'm worried that's going to compromise the bass response of this new version, which I just don't want to give up any bass response because it's so good, comparatively speaking, in the second gen AirPods Pro. The new Apples are easier to control than the Sony because we now have volume control on the stems. Obviously the Sony still have the tap on the right for pause and then the tap for transparency mode on the left. That's good, but it's a bit trickier to control volume with the Sony than it is with the AirPods Pro version 2. Although tricky is probably the wrong word. It's just the Apple sort of haptics now with the swipe control, I just think is a more elegant solution. One thing that's not in doubt here is that the Apples are far more comfortable for longer periods than the Sonys. And all of that means that I now pick up the Apple AirPods Pro 2 more often than the Sony WF-1000XM4. And that's because the new AirPods Pro are, I think, more of an all-rounder than the Sony true wireless IEMs that I previously enthused about. So are the Apple AirPods Pro second generation, the best true wireless IEM available right now? Well, no, is the short answer. I mean, they are very much a jack of all trades. I do not mean that pejoratively. They are excellent in many, many different ways, especially with Apple Watch integration, which I use a little bit, and also with the handoff to the Mac and back. It's super smooth and super quick nowadays to be able to move from, say, an iPhone to a Mac and back again with your audio. And I also love the ear tip seal tester inside the iPhone. That's a lovely touch. But there is a true wireless IEM out there available right now for less money than the Apple AirPods Pro Generation 2 that I think, with music, sounds quite a bit better. And we'll come to that in the next video. But if you like this video, please consider giving us a like down below. If you like my attitude towards, well, it's not even high-end audio, this is just audio really. And I must admit, at the moment with this run of Bluetooth headphone videos, I'm indulging myself. So normally I have to, when I decide what I'm going to make a video about, I have to sort of weigh up what my audience would like against what I would like to do and try and find a sort of where they meet in the middle. And sometimes it's closer to what I would like and sometimes it's closer to what my audience would like. This one is very much about my own curiosity, right? I bought these AirPods Pro 2nd Gen with my own money, mainly thanks to a nudge from my buddy in LA, and I'm really glad I did. And I'm hoping that you're glad that I investigated these on this channel. And if you are glad, then please consider subscribing to this channel because we've got plenty of more Bluetooth noise cancelling headphone stuff coming. Believe it or not, I'm on a tear right now. So yeah, subscribe to this channel if you dig that. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. I should say something about spatial audio as it relates to Apple Music, because that's what I mainly listen to, Apple Music with the Apple AirPods Pro 2nd Gen when I was in Spain last week. Now, Talking Heads have just issued their entire catalogue in spatial audio. I'm not sure yet if this has been directly pulled from the surround sound mixes that were done for the Brick box set from 2005, or was it 2006? Whatever it is. Not sure about that yet, but whatever it is, I've got to say, and I think Jerry Harrison did this, he made these albums sound new all over again. I was playing track after track in Spain going, this is just like another world. Truly, I know that they've been slightly remixed. So in some tracks we can hear more of sort of David Byrne's quirky vocals. We can hear more synth textures, better bass lines. This is the thing with a good spatial audio mix behind stereo headphones, because this is all done in DSP with stereo headphones, we get better separation. That's the key takeaway for me with spatial, is that everything is separated this way and this way. It is astonishing. And I would urge you to go and listen to the Talking Head stuff on Apple Music if you've got a pair of Apple earphones or headphones, because it really is quite remarkable what Jerry Harrison has done. Now, this is the thing though, is that not every artist has done that. In fact, there is so little spatial audio out there, relatively speaking. There's even less than there is of high res. So I have to temper my enthusiasm because Talking Heads are my favorite band of all time. So of course I'm going to be excited when they come out in spatial and it sounds good. But there's very little other music that's this good, but also there's very little other music in spatial, period. So yeah, I don't want to get carried away about sort of spatial, Dolby Atmos inside spatial is what I should really call it. I can't really get too carried away about that just yet. But I do think that if Dolby Atmos or sort of surround sound versions of albums, I mean, surround sound is kind of a misnomer really, because you don't feel like it's a sound is coming from behind you. It's just the separation thing that I think is the big advantage. I think the headphone market is where it's going to take off. I really don't think that many people at all are going to rewire their homes with an Atmos system. I think even 5.1 was too much of an ask for most people. That might be okay with wireless implementations of say 4.1 or 5.1 if it's possible. But really, I think if Dolby Atmos / spatial is going to take off, it will be the headphone market that drives this, and on streaming services like Apple. So yeah, I just think that the the stuff that is available in Spatial on Apple Music really ices the cake of the new AirPods Pro Generation 2. And it was, and the Sony were also better for music. And that also made the AirPods Pro, the originals, better for podcasts However, a music producer friend in Los Angeles, so 3 years after Apple introduced the AirPods Pro and a year since we made a video about them, Apple have now, so functionally sorry. When you drop it on a wireless charging, God's sake, a normal sort of lightning socket. Okay, what the hell? Try again. The tips have also been changed slightly. They're now, the tips are also the same shape, although I think the mesh has been changed. Just, God's sake, John. And so with that, plus the other with each earpod, no. Oh God, what am I doing here, Olaf? Okay. Yeah.